Welcome to the Blackout Show, presented by the Guillen Grid, a show about the Chicago White Sox baseball, the good, the bad, the ugly. We'll debate what's working and what's not on the south side of Chicago. It's old school versus new school baseball. And most importantly, we're keeping all the receipts.
Yo, what is up, everybody? Tonight, Elijah Evans from Just Baseball is joining me, and he's a frequent guest as of the past couple of months here. A lot of big things like the draft and, the trade deadline. You joined us, and, we did our best covering for whatever, I won't say lackluster, but at the end of the day, hopefully better times are to come. But tonight, Elijah, we've got a couple topics from the White Sox to discuss. And let's first lead off with our debuts for some rookies that were called up. Let's start with Jairo Iriarte. Give me some of your thoughts, because I saw a tweet from you talking about his debut, and you haven't really seen the same as you did with him in the farm system. But I don't want to steal your words from you. Go ahead and give us some of your thoughts versus that Baltimore opening.
Always good to join you, Gonzo. Appreciate you having me back on. And Iriarte, it's an interesting case with him, because I think when he was the second piece of that Cease trade, right, I was really excited. I think the stuff plays up. I think he has a lot more room to grow. He's the type of pitcher where I see a lot of good signs with him, but I also think there's still things he's working on and still things he's figuring out. This season, the stuff is backed up a little bit, to be honest with you. I mean, we haven't seen quite the same level of stuff with him as we did some of last year when he was with the Padres organization. And just in general, I think his stuff is not quite where you want it to be. The velo's come down a little bit. He's been a little bit all over with the command, but in the farm, the past month or so in AA, he was really looking good. He looked better than he looked in the first half of the season. He was finding his rhythm more. He was allowing pretty minimal contact, if any hard contact, in Birmingham. And then now he gets up to the big leagues, and it's like, you put him in first of all, he jumps a level, right? He jumps AAA entirely, and he is in a situation where he's now relieving for the first time in his career in one inning spurts, as opposed to being, somebody who's been starting all year in Birmingham, right? And I don't hate the idea of getting him big league innings. I like seeing these young guys, right? That's something I've been big on, is just seeing the young guys, but it's been kind of hard. It's been hard to watch these games with him where he just can't find the zone. I mean, it's 6 walks in 3 appearances so far, 2 and 2/3 innings, right? He's not allowing hits. It's not like Iriarte is getting hit around. The stuff is really good, and he's never been a guy, even in Birmingham this year, that's been getting hit hard. I mean, his stuff can play, and I think he's done a good job, limiting hard contact. He hasn't really given up. He's only given up 1 hit, right? So he's not giving up a lot of hits. He's just not throwing strikes yet. It's cool to see him at the big league level, but the reality is, you're not going to be that effective if you're not throwing strikes. And he is someone that's already been kind of a difficulty for him. And I think now that he's in a 1 inning spurt, he really wants to impress, and he really wants to have his stuff tick up and have the best of his, really show his best stuff, which he's had a few good pitches where it's like, man, that is nasty, but the command just isn't there yet. And it's going to take some time. And I think, the rest of the season for him is really just about experimenting and seeing how he can get comfortable with the big leagues.
And that control is really an issue, in the farm system. I mean, he's putting up good numbers, but, when the ERA and WHIP is high, it tends not to escalate too well in the major leagues. And I think he's got the stuff to stay in the major leagues, but if he's going to continue having the issues with command, it's not going to have success in the big leagues for the long run. And listen, we've got a very competitive farm system with arms coming up. So if this is a guy that wants to be in this rotation, he's going to have to prove it, especially coming out of the bullpen. I mean, you're not going to be having any success as a starter or reliever if you don't have the command to back 100%. Yourself up.
Yeah, 100%. And it's like you look at the numbers in the minor leagues, like you mentioned, right? Like 104 hits allowed total in 126 innings is incredibly good. Like there's very few pitchers, especially at that level and that age too, where he's really young, he's still kind of raw, that are allowing that few hits, right? 7 total home runs allowed this season. Like he's not getting hit hard. But on the flip side, 17 hit by pitches, 57 walks is not going to cut it, right? Like it's working. He's getting outs. He still has an ERA of 3.7 in Birmingham this year, right? Like there's a lot to like there, but he's got to find more consistency, especially with, as simple as his fastball being in the zone is going to be a big step for him. I think when he gets his fastball, especially on the high parts of the zone too, because he has a lot of ride in his fastball. So when he can hit those top corners with a moving fastball, he's really effective. He just has to figure out a way to get the ball in the zone more frequently.
Yep. I mean, looked like a guy that debuted with a slider. I didn't see anything different as far as what we've seen from him already. I mean, it was looking solid, but I know you talked a little bit about the sinker and how it wasn't quite there with that combo. You tweeted about the combo that you haven't seen from either Birmingham or Charlotte that we were looking forward to. And to be honest, that first debut, I'm not sure if maybe it's nerves, but that sinker was just rising.
Yeah.
A rising sinker is not going to get you anywhere. So, yeah, I mean, we'll see. For one, I'm not going to lie. Like, I was really hoping that he would have got a start to a game.
Yeah.
Because for me, the biggest thing was, why are we preparing him to be, or like, why are we starting him in the bullpen at the end of this? At the end of the season, when you didn't have that philosophy with him going through the minor league system. Like, it's one thing if he's got all those innings or a good amount of innings out of the bullpen down the either Birmingham or Charlotte, but we didn't see that. So I didn't quite understand why they're starting him in the bullpen, especially when there's holes that can be made there in the rotation to give him those starts, as we were seeing it from Nastrini before they sent him down.
Right.
So
yeah, 100%. And it doesn't quite make sense. I see the idea, and I think it's partially just because he was on the 40-man already. I mean, I think that the organization has been pretty clear at the fact that they're just continuing to roll with guys on the 40-man, which, Sean Burke's an exception who we're going to talk about next. So I'm glad they did that exception there where they did add someone to the 40-man because he deserved it, right? But Iriarte, I think it was more of a case of like, oh, he's on the 40-man, so let's just see what he has at the big league level. He's already kind of at his inning limit. I think part of it is that they didn't want him throwing past, 150 innings or so, and he was already at 126 innings in the minors, right? So I think it was kind of like, if he's going to already be limited, you might as well let him be limited in the bullpen role. But I'd almost rather just see him start and throw 3 innings, right? Like or 2 or 3 innings, right? Even if it's a short start and it's basically like a spot starter, I'd rather see that almost than see him in this 1 inning spurt where he kind of is trying to figure out how to show his stuff, but is also like only knows he has an inning. So it just is a little bit of a weird situation. And like, it's not like the stuff is bad, right? So, I mean, for reference, right, 33% whiff rate, like when he actually is throwing the ball in the right locations, he's getting whiffs, right? He's getting swings and misses. He's throwing well. The stuff is good. It's not really the issue there. It's just, like we said, the walk rate's high. I mean, the expected batting average against him of 170, like he's not allowing a lot of hits. He's not allowing a lot of contact even at all. A 25% strikeout rate is not bad, especially for his first 3 games and in 3 little appearances, right? But again, it's just a command. He's got to throw strikes. That's what it comes down to at the end of the day. So I think it'll come. I just think I'd like to, whatever happens this year is kind of just a bonus in terms of getting a look at him. I think next year he still shouldn't start in the bigs. I don't think he's ready yet. I think he needs a handful of starts in the minor leagues to really continue to key in on some things. I think he probably needs an entire half season, if not more, frankly. So I'm hoping that just him being up this year in September doesn't necessarily mean that he's immediately on the team next year, because I just don't see a pitcher that's quite ready personally.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of that has to deal with spring training too.
Yeah, for sure.
And I don't know what his plans are for the fall. If he is gonna be in the fall, I don't think he's not
going to throw in the fall.
Yeah.
Like he's at his innings, man. I mean, I think you don't want to push him too much, especially a guy that's this young and has the arm talent, right? I think he's probably done throwing live after these small starts. But at the same time, like I think it's going to come for him. I think he'll be on the roster next year at some point. I personally think he needs a little more minor league innings to keep refining some things. It's close, this is a guy who you want on the big league team next year. I don't think he's quite ready from what we've seen so far, but I could see a really strong offseason in spring training completely pushing him into the opening day roster. So yeah.
And it didn't sound like Junior had anything to say about him even pitching for Team Venezuela. So, and I'm sure that comes from the White Sox end of it, regardless, that they're just gonna shut him down and allow him to rest, and then to jump back into it, come after the offseason here, going to spring training. But let's get back a little bit to the 40-man after we talk about Sean Burke. One last thing, Elijah, because I get innings restriction, but at the end of the day, like, it's 1 month of baseball. So whether you're going to burn those 20 innings and 4 starts or scared it across the last month, like, I'm just frustrated, man, because end of the day, because you're already innings capped on Crochet, so why don't they just split those 2 and those 3 to 4?
Would be totally down for that. Yep. I agree.
I know. Yeah. I understand you're kind of looking at it for playing devil's advocate with me with how maybe they're doing. Getz is it's a good combination, I'm sure, of Getz and Bannister at this point.
Yeah. While
they're shaping up the roster, but all right, let's move on to Sean Burke. Go ahead and take it away. His one start so far.
I've been beating this drum for a long time. You've heard me beating this drum. I mean, Burke is a guy that he was supposed to debut last year, right? Like, this was supposed to be a 2023 rotation piece. The expectation was he was going to go into Charlotte in the last year, make 5-10 starts there, and be up mid-season last year. Frankly, that was always the hope with him. He had a shoulder injury that nagged him, didn't go away. Eventually, has surgery, right? So he basically 2023 is a wash. He comes into this season, he's healthy come May. He takes a while to rehab, right? He had to go through that time when you're coming off of a shoulder surgery. You got to take that time to rehab it. He makes his way back. He's kind of back in his full form come July. The last month in August, I mean, he was nails in Charlotte, and it's not perfect, right? He's not a perfect product. I'm not going to act like he's someone who doesn't have faults, because he still does, but it's been a month now of me being like, okay, this guy needs to get major league innings. And it's not necessarily, it's going to be hard. Like, it's not going to be perfect. And it's still a guy who has command issues, right? Like, similarly to Iriarte, it's not quite the same type of command issues, but he does have command issues at times, and he has a hard time locating, and that kind of leads to tricky counts for him and gets his pitch count up there, right? Like, he hasn't thrown more than 5 innings in a start this season, I believe. So definitely, he threw 5 2/3 once, but generally speaking, he kind of has been capped, A, because he's coming back off injury, and B, just because he, does have some command issues at times for sure. But at the same time, the stuff has been really good lately. It's been sharp. The strikeouts have been there every single game. He's come down with the walks. I mean, in his starts in August, he didn't have any game with over 3 walks, right? So it was 2 walks, 3 walks, 1, 0, 2, 1, 1, right? So, like, he's definitely found some more command. And in reality, like, this guy's stuff is up there with pretty much anybody in the system, aside from like your top, Schultz and Smith, right? So, like, his stuff is going to be there. For him, it's just a matter of if he can locate, especially with the curveball, right? So Burke's a guy that, he needs to be able to command that curveball, because it is a nasty pitch, and his curveball has legit, 65, 70 grade upside, right? Like, it is, when you saw that first pitch, this first strikeout of his career, right? Like, nasty stuff. So it is a really effective pitch, and his slider has been really good this year too, because he used to be a really heavy curveball guy, and now he's kind of really brought in that slider where he actually throws the slider even more than he throws the curveball now. And he has a slider his slider's been a 68% strike rate this year, which is pretty impressive for a slider that has so much movement too. To be able to throw it for a strike 68% of the time is definitely a strong number. The fastball command also can be iffy. So having your 2 best pitches in your curveball and your fastball have some iffy command at times can lead to some struggles. He looked really good in his debut, though, Chris. I thought he was really good overall. I thought the stuff looked good. The command was not perfect, but solid. The curveball was really nice. So was the slider. He had 6 of 10 whiffs on breaking balls, right? So he got 10 swings on breaking balls, and 6 of them were whiffs between the slider and the curveball. Really good stuff. And this is a little tidbit here. I do believe from what I've been hearing that he is going to make a start here in the near future. So getting kind of introduced as a bullpen pitcher, but I do think that Burke is going to be getting some starts here down the stretch, which is going to be exciting, because I think he deserves it, and he's proved worthy of getting starts now.
Yeah, I mean, I know I went back, and after they sent Nostrini down, I was hoping that they would have sent up Eater to get some starts. Yeah. Between Eater and Burke, because I felt like both were deserving. Not only like with their production down there, but also just the career path for the prospects at this point. I feel like you need to get your assessment of both while they're there. And I know I listed several arms down there in Charlotte to be brought up. But I don't want to get too ahead of myself here before we go on to that 40-man discussion. But when it comes to Burke, I mean, he saw how nasty that curveball was with, I think that was Josh Naylor that was striking out on that curveball. And
I think it was Bo Naylor, but yeah.
Was it Bo? Yeah.
One of the Naylors.
One of the, they just looked awful on those swings.
Yeah, for sure. And J-Ram too, right? I mean, getting J-Ram to swing like that is really rare. He got out of an inning on a J-Ram strikeout like that. I mean, this is a guy whose stuff is like I said, his stuff is there. Like he has some really good stuff, and it's been coming back more and more with even more life. Like Burke hit his highest career velo ever in his debut too. I don't know if you caught that. He threw a 98 something mile an hour fastball. His top this year in Charlotte was 97.3. So he beat his top, velo this entire season by over a mile per hour in his debut. Yeah, it's adrenaline, right? You're getting revved up, but like, this is a guy who knows he can let it loose. He can let it fly. He gets the velo up. Both the breaking balls are very effective at times, right? Like he just got to command it. And he did in his first game. So I'm really excited to see 2 or 3 starts out of him here down the stretch. Cause this is a guy who, was at one time, even 2 years ago, right, was one of the top 5-6 prospects in the system. And yes, it was a really bad system, but now he's like barely even in top 30 consideration most places. And this is a guy who, is at the big league level now and looks like a pretty nasty MLB type pitcher.
Yeah, no, I want you just to touch on real quickly here the fact that he's a candidate for the Rule 5 draft. Kind of explain that to our viewers, because
I think he's a year short still, actually, which is crazy. And that's why he got added, because I believe he was 2021 draft, so it's typically 4 years. So I think he still has one more year, unless I'm mistaken here, because I feel like I checked on this. But if he was, hypothetically, right, for people that don't know this, like when you get to a certain point after 4 years for, I think, college guys and 5 years for high school guys, you're eligible to be in the Rule 5 draft if you're not on the 40 man at that point, right? So for guys that are prospects that he's never been on the 40 man to this point, he hasn't had to be. But once you get to 4 years as a college guy, 5 years as a pro guy, without being on the 40 man roster, you can be taken in the Rule 5 draft in the offseason, in which case you're basically acquired by another team. If they take you in that, they have to have you on their active roster, and if they end up removing you from the active roster, then you get returned to your original team. So the way it works, if Burke was if he was eligible for the draft, then those are guys you have to protect by putting them on your 40 man so they don't get basically taken by another team, essentially, right? So he's a guy that I think he's not eligible next year, but like it doesn't. My thing is like there's some degree of like, yes, you should pay attention to the Rule 5 draft. It's important. You don't want to lose guys for nothing, especially if you think they're legit prospects, but you should also call guys up that deserve to be called up and not plan everything around that. Because what I can't stand sometimes is when the White Sox don't call guys up even when they're deserving of it. And Burke's a case of this, because he should have been called up a few weeks ago, in my opinion. And now is fine, right? Like, I'm glad it happened eventually because he deserves it. But at the same time, it's like, don't not call a guy up just because you don't need to yet, and you don't need to have him on your 40 man. If somebody's proven they're ready to be called up, call them up regardless and find room, especially when you've got a roster with 12 veterans on the 40 man who are completely useless and irrelevant to the future. 20, 12 is probably an understatement there, frankly, but we've talked about this before between me and you and everybody else. There's 15 players on the 40 man roster right now that you could DFA tomorrow and it would not make a single difference for the future.
Please. Yeah, no, yeah. I sent you a thread, I think it was a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, of me and someone else going back and forth on X, but Twitter. Something I just can't, I understand some thought processes, but at the end of the day, like you want what's best for the organization. And let me actually pull up the active roster, because like you said, there's if you are let's just say there's veterans that aren't producing, and then you got veterans on either 1 or 2 year deals. And at the end of the day, if they're not here for the foreseeable, future within your I'll call it a short-term plan, right? If they're not in that window, then why are you going to keep them here?
It's money. It's saving money at the end of the day. That's all it comes down to. It's saving money, and it's trying to avoid paying guys before you have to, because once you get a guy on a 40 man, then you're gonna have to pay him sooner. And it's the reality is it's just cheap. I don't like being I like to give benefit of the doubt more than often. That's how I kind of operate in general. But at the end of the day, like, there's no baseball incentive to keeping a lot of these players on this team, other than the fact if you deem guys not ready in the farm system, okay, sure. But there is guys that are ready. Like that's just not the reality, right? If there truly was an entire crop of guys that aren't ready, that's one thing. there is guys that are ready, and there's guys that, given their age, are deserving of that chance at the big league level because you need to see what they have, right? When a guy gets to 25, 26 years old and they're in AAA, and they're, especially if they're playing well, some guys are not as well, right? But like guys that are hitting and pitching well in AAA and are already 25, 26-year-old prospects, like you need to see that so you can go into 2025 with an idea of what you have in your roster and within your organization before you try to continue this rebuild, right? Without even knowing what some of these players bring to the table.
Right, and I'm just gonna rattle some names here for you. All right.
Yeah.
So you got Justin Anderson, Daniel De Los Santos.
Bye.
And I'm just saying pitchers, right? I'm just gonna
just start with pitchers. Yep.
When I look at Charlotte, right, there's not too many hitters that.
I mean,
that
Ramos finally getting
wanted,
at bats, but yeah,
right.
It took him long enough. Yeah.
Again, he should have been here.
Yes.
But other than him, you're waiting for Cuero to come back.
He's not up this year at all. I mean, you could make a case for Elko. I think there's a case. I think you could very much make a case that Elko deserves innings over Sheets or Vaughn at this point, but it's not. There's not a clear case as much on the hitting side. Pitching side, there's plenty of guys.
Right, but that's my focus is the pitching side of this. But I really thought if Cuero, once he is fully healthy, I wouldn't mind seeing him get that call up to.
Yeah, I've been against production.
That.
I get the idea. I think he's the injury is going to take that possibility away because you don't want to mess with the back injury, especially for a catcher. Right. It's not even worth it. And B, I kind of was against that in the first place just because he is so young. Like he's super raw still, and he's been amazing this year. Don't get me wrong. I'm fired up. I think he's become a pretty clear top 50-ish prospect in baseball at this point, which is awesome. But at the same time, like he does have some time to go. But back to the pitching side, I'll let you keep it going because there's more guys, I'm sure.
And this is a 1-year deal guy, but I would just remove him so I can get some innings from other guys. But Chris Flexen, he's a guy that
gone.
I don't care if it's a 1-year deal and how that might look for 1 year. At the end of the day, money's money when it comes to these free agents coming up. So why are we even wasting time when he's not proving it? And again, when I talk, bro, it also age is a big factor into this too, because you got Chad Cole, who's just at that age and production. It's like,
nope,
don't need it.
They've trimmed some of the fat recently, to be fair.
I could make, depending on how many names are really on my list. I forgot, maybe 4 or 5 arms down there in Charlotte.
Yeah.
I could make a case for Matt Foster.
I don't need to see any more from Foster. He's been okay, but I don't personally need to see much more from him.
Let's see who else here.
I think I think Varland's been good enough that lately that you'd like to keep him there for the rest of the season. That was an interesting pickup at the least, right?
You said who?
I think Varland is worth keeping around for now. I just think he's been okay lately, and I think he's shown enough where it's like, oh, that could be an early inning bullpen piece for the future, maybe, right? He's cheap too. I don't mind that. Yeah, I think, but either way, I think that's really about it. But there used to be more too, right? There was Brebbia, there was Stephen Wilson. Like they have trimmed some fat, to be fair. Like we have to give credit, right? Like I know we've been saying, come on, let's get rid of guys, but they have gotten rid of some, which is good. But there's more that could easily. Those 4 or 5 you just named could go tomorrow, and it wouldn't make a difference to me personally.
Yeah, it was kind of. Yeah, it was 5. So
yeah, that's plenty. That's plenty of people, right?
That is about half your bullpen that you could get a fair assessment of guys that are 100%. Right there in AAA. Because this is the thing. There's another 5 to 6 in AA, and even in single high A, another 5 or 6 that's coming. Like you got waves of guys coming through the system. And you really need to give yourself a fair assessment to these arms, because at the end of the day, you want to have that assessment with all these guys. Not only to know like which guys are going to be in your picture, but also know which of these guys that you're like, hey, these guys might be trade bait to get other prospects who we desperately need. And when I say arms to trade, like these are guys that you can look for possible, on the other side of the ball with, there's some hitting prospects to get in here. But go on. I was gonna.
No, you're completely right. I was just gonna build on that a little bit more with the pitchers and be like, even aside from starters, right? If you say, okay, you've got Burkup, you've given Estrani some innings, you've given Bush some innings, like they've done a pretty good job getting some starters innings finally, right? That's good. Iriarte's up, even though he's out of the pen. That's fine, right? in the bullpen, right? All those guys you just mentioned. Trey Mago in the second half. I'm just going to read you two different names because these are two guys that like there's just no reason at all. Trey Mago in the second half, a 2.01 ERA, a 106 whip, just consistently shoving. Addison Coffey in the second half. This is another guy who's been nothing but lights out this season. Addison Coffey in the second half of the season since the break has a 1.93 ERA, a 1.02 or 1.2 whip, 25 strikeouts, right? I mean, it's just these are two guys that are like Coffey, and they're not young, right? Coffey's 25 and Mago is 26, right? So these are two relievers that are already kind of at that age where you need to see what they have that have been nails all season, absolutely all season. What is the holdup? There's just no logical holdup other than the fact that you're saving money. You're saving money on not having to cut these guys, and you're saving money on not having to pay these guys sooner if they actually succeed, right? So it's not logical. It doesn't really make sense. And it doesn't matter at the end of the day because the season's a wash. Like, yes, I get it doesn't change the season. It's nothing changes the season at this point. This is the worst team in baseball history and nothing's changing that. But at the same time, like, if we're focusing on development and they've finally admitted that that is the focus, kind of, sort of admitted, whatever that means, like these are the guys that should be getting innings. Sean Burke is a good start for sure. Getting Nastrini and Bush some innings, even though they've struggled, is a good thing, right? But like these are other guys you got to give a chance because what are we doing here? You're muted, Gonzo.
Thank you. At the end of the day, let's just, on the simple term of the 40-man, roster with construction-wise, like even if you do the movement, demote, promote those 5 or 6 spots, right? At the end of the day, when this 40-man roster, honestly, dude, everybody on there is written in pencil. There's no one in there you're putting in marker like we're not touching this guy from this roster. Because at the end of the day, you're going to be trading likely, or should be trading Crochet and Robert. So at the end of the day, there's really no one on there that I'm like, they're untouchable. And let's just face it, those 5 or 6 spots, man, come this offseason, if you do trade Crochet, Robert, right, and the guys you're getting back are on the other teams, they're on the other team's 40-man, well, guess what? We've got 35 to 34 other spots that we can play with.
Truly, yeah, no, you're not wrong. I mean, and then we didn't even mention, like, I know you're right that there's less guys ready in the hitting side, but there's still plenty of guys you don't need. Like, what are we possibly seeing at this point from Chucky Robinson and Nicky Lopez? Like, what are we possibly? Corey Yulks. I mean, it goes even Sheets, Sosa. Like, there's more you can make a case for. Jacob Amaya. Like, there is at least 3 to 4 hitters on the hitting side that you can make a case that don't need to be there, and you can make a case for. I mean, there is a case for pretty much everybody on the hitting side, aside from Ramos, Corey Lee, maybe Fletcher and Robert, obviously Vargas. That's like 5-6 guys that really are must keeps on the roster type of guys. There's gonna be 40-man spots open. And I think part of this is that they're just kind of bracing for a complete overhaul of the 40-man in the offseason. So they're just trying to be kind of gentle with it right now, which I understand. Like, this is guys' livelihoods. Like, I get all of that. Like, there is definitely that aspect to it, but you just gotta at some point lean into it. And I think we're gonna see, half of the 40-man be turned over this offseason. And that needs to happen after the season that we've just watched.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. Like, you do have to be thorough when the time is needed, right? You're in a better situation than we are right now.
Yep.
When you can actually, because the shift of this is, all right, not only are we going to layer our system with these prospects, but at the end of the day, once you actually have a good foundation, right? And then you start adding some free agents with some holes, right? There's going to come a time in your long-term build that you're like, okay, we have to slim it back on the 40 and actually start playing it more smart. But we're not there yet. We're not there yet.
Not even close. Not even close.
We are far from that. And for me, it's just useless to have a discussion of having these guys block these prospects and not even get to see. And I don't care if it's just 1 month of baseball. For me, that's a 1 month of assessment that I can have a better idea of going forward, going into spring training, of having an idea of what things might play out to be.
Right.
But hey, I think that should wrap up our little debut talk and some 40-man discussion. So So we saw the news last week that Martin Prady was let go. Marco Prady. I keep thinking Prado, bro, from the Braves back in the day.
Marco Patty. It's definitely a goofy name anyway, so it's okay. Not a common name.
The lead international scout, he was let go. However phrase you want to give to that. I'll let you start off, and I'll kind of cut in when needed, because I'm kind of thinking of my own thoughts, not only my own, but I know I talked to OJ about it, and OJ blew our group chat about it. So I'll let you lead us off on this discussion. Go ahead, man.
Yeah, I mean, this was needed. My guy James Fox at Future Sox has been kind of telling me he's been saying forever to me, like, dude, the international signing is just brutal, and it has been for a while. I mean, you look back at the last 5 to 10 years of White Sox international signings, right? And like, yeah, there was some acquired via trades, but like in terms of like actual signings by the White Sox, and for the record, Jose Abreu does not count, right? Like that doesn't count. He was a professional baseball player already. Luis Robert was, borderline, right? I think that's the one you can make a case like, oh, that was a great signing, but he was also, he was still already playing he was playing borderline pro ball already, even though he was so young, right? So it's like Luis Robert, you can give flowers for, sure. There's just nobody else, dude. I mean, you go back years and you see just a lack of talent and a lack of development from these international prospects. I mean, I pulled up the 2021 list, I think, and then the 2022 list of international signings. And this is only 3 years ago, right? Like, you hope the expectation is it's going to take these guys some time, right? Like when you're signed internationally, the expectation, especially these amateur guys, right? Like you're expecting it to take a few years. The majority of this list from 3 years ago are guys that you already have given up on or already know are not something. And the fact that you're 3 years into some of these signings and you can already say like these guys are not pieces is a really bad sign for the general stance of the international signing lately. It's just, I'll get to that question in a sec from Blackout Show. That's a good question from you guys, but it's right. Like 2021, Yoelqui Cespedes. Okay. Jorge Vera already out of the organization. Yolbert Sanchez already out of the organization. Lenin Sosa, say what you want to say about Lenin Sosa, whatever. Jose Rodriguez out of the organization. Benjamin Bailey out of the organization. Brian Ramos, okay, that's a good one. Not bad. We'll take it, right? Luis Maestas out of the organization. Yolvin Sylvan out of the organization. Elijah Tatis out of the organization. That is 2 players on the White Sox roster right now, and every other player on that list isn't even in the organization anymore. And this was 3 years ago. This wasn't 6 years ago. This wasn't 7 years ago. 3 years ago, international signings that usually take a long time to develop, and everyone except 2 of them are already out of the organization entirely. Going to 2022, right? Oscar Colas. Okay, sure. I mean, again, it's not, there's not much to love there, but at the same time, like we'll see, right? We'll see what happens. He is something, right? And then there's other guys like,
dude.
Okay, cool. Fine. I don't see a need for him. I think there's some things there that I've liked. He's done some good things in Charlotte lately, but like, you've got Eric Hernandez, right? Like, I don't even think he's in the organization anymore. He might be in the organization somewhere, but he's not doing much. So, there's layers to it. It's not just as simple as like, who did they sign? In general, you need a new direction. You need a new start with the international signing. The organization has a good history with international signings, especially Cuban and Dominican signings, right? Like there's been a lot of good players to come to the White Sox organization in the past, right? The present right now, there's not a lot of guys that have been successful signings in recent years. And the question of where do you go to find someone, not the White Sox organization. That's where you go. You go way outside the organization and you look at the teams that have done a good job, right? Like it's sometimes it's that simple. And I know it isn't that simple in reality, right? Like you have to search in all different places. And I get that. And they're going to do that. I hope they're going to do their due diligence on it. But like the international director, like that should be someone from a good organization and an organization that has specifically done a good job developing international talent in the past, 5 to 10 years, right? Like take the sample and work off that and see if you can find someone who has proven success in signing international prospects that have actually panned out to the big league level.
Yeah. I mean, again, if you only have 2 known names with Abreu, Robert over the past decade, almost approaching a decade now.
Yeah.
That is not a good sign. It's not a good sign.
Not great.
But to be frank, this is kind of where I look at it, where again, it's not just us. Not saying that this has any praise for or not, I don't want to say praise, but any positivity for keeping Marco at all. That was the right move, but at the end of the day, it just baseball as a whole, not the best as far as finding, I don't want to say finding the value, but giving opportunity to the Latino countries. And I wish Junior was here. I'm sure when he comes back, he'll give you a further answer into this, but
for sure,
he knows that there's a lack of, I want to say opportunity, but baseball doesn't do a good job in general with finding, I want to say finding, but giving that opportunity to these Latino players and truly actually, like, I know I discussed with him that if the MLB was serious about international scouting, they would set up academies in these Latino American countries.
And they have in Puerto Rico, but that's
right.
Not the right. You have to go beyond that, you know.
Beyond that, you're making enough money to put these academies together and really groom these kids, not only to be ready, but to be on par with our prospects here in the States. Because again, we're sending them from college to pro level at 18 and so on. But some of these guys are coming in at 16 to 18. And then there's a huge just missing gap of really competitive time and play to be truly ready at that age. And it could be better. That's what I'll say to that.
Yep.
And again, so bigger picture here, MLB needs to do a better job, but I'm very curious to see who the White Sox put into place, if it's going to be an internal, external. But I think the bigger question here, honestly, is what is Chris Getz really going to do? Because at the current moment, he's got so many hands in this organization, so many roles. He's a vice president, he's a GM, and now he's going to be an international scout at the moment. Like, he needs to do a lot more delegation, and you can delegate, but then you also got to put some good people in these roles to really take off with what you're trying to build. And this is a guy that isn't ready for that. Not only GM, but vice president. Like, these are some big questions because he wasn't ready for that role. He didn't show anything truly from his time as, below with the farm system that really showed us that he was ready for that. And I hate to be the guy to I'm always the one saying prove yourself. Like, I'm not one to talk negative about people, but this is just a situation that I can't say I feel for the man, but it's quite a position to be in as your first task as a rookie GM, first year GM. So, Elijah,
it's tough. It's tough.
It is.
I mean, there's not an easy answer, and I really do truly understand White Sox fans who are just angry with Chris Getz and upset about the way the season's gone and upset about the direction and all these things. He was put in a unwinnable situation. I don't think he's done a good job necessarily, but he was put in a position that I don't think anybody in the universe would really succeed in. I don't think the best GMs in the world would be doing a good job right now. I think they might be doing better, right? Like, I don't think he's been great, but it's just an unwinnable situation, man. I think that's something that White Sox fans don't often really see, and it's nobody's fault. Like, I get not seeing that because it sucks, right? It sucks watching your favorite team just be awful and be the worst team ever, right? Like, but it's not an easy situation to be in. This team has a lot of work to do. There's a lot of organizational issues that go much beyond Chris Getz, and there's a lot of things that are going to have to be done to get to right the ship and get it back on track, right? And it's like, it's going to take some time. And, a new scouting department in the international side is important. There were some pro scouts in the US side that were like, let go as well, guys that have been there for a while, right? So, like, let's do some overhaul in the scouting, right? In that department, in the international scouting especially, right? You got to make some roster moves. You got to trade some pieces. You got to continue to develop the farm, right? Like, there's a lot of layers to this rebuild, right? and it's not fun, but it has to happen. You got to make it happen one way or another, and you just got to keep rolling and just see where everything takes you. I know that sounds crummy and it's not fun. People don't like to hear that, but it's like, you just got to keep riding it out and seeing what happens and continue to try and make the right moves piece by piece, right? It's not, there's not one answer. There's not one piece that's fixing this organization. There's not one, signing or hiring, right? There's not one thing. There's not two things. There's about 20 things at the very least that need to happen, right? So it's going to take some time. I see more vision than I think most people see. I don't know if it's fully concrete, but I do see some layer of the vision for the next 2 to 3 years right now. It's going to not be fun for a bit. 2025 is not going to be good. If people are thinking this team's going to have a huge turnaround, I hate to break it to you. Not sure about that. They're not going to be a 120 loss team, I think. I hope there's going to be some improvement, but it's definitely not going to be a fun year next year. It's not going to be, out of nowhere, we're competing like the Royals did this past season, right? Like that's not happening, unfortunately. But there's a path. There is a path, and there's some ways can get better. It just is going to take some time, Gonzo.
Yeah, no, it's going to take time. At the end of the day, this does fall. I mean, I'll be blunt honest. This falls on Jerry. I mean, let's be honest. He's the owner. The fact that he said in the Getz press conference that we're going to stay internal because that's going to save us time, that was furthest from the truth. And I'm not sure if it's ego. I mean, a lot of this has to do with loyalty for Jerry, and that's why Marco had his role for as long as he did, is the loyalty to Jerry. So, and look, let's be honest, man. We're the third biggest market in the country. Both, not just us, but both organizations with White Sox and Cubs. I hate to bring the Cubs up, but let's be honest, when you're in this market, you need to be doing a lot better than what either team has done in the past decade.
100%.
Not only with the money that's involved, but both fan bases deserve better.
100%.
And I don't know if, whether they move or not, stay in Chicago or go elsewhere, your focus can't be on where you're going to put a stadium you're going to be in the future. That shouldn't be a priority at the moment, or cutting revenue down to save money for yourself. Like, you got to put the priority in the product on the field, and that's what's going to get you money at the end of the day. And flat out, it's just not happening. And you keep losing money. Well, unfortunately for Jerry, he's going to keep losing money if he keeps with the same business approach that he's had for the past decade. And I just hope I can't really say names for, chat or yourself, Elijah, but if it was me, I'd be looking at scouts from Milwaukee, from the Dodgers, from the Phillies, from Seattle, even Seattle.
Tampa.
I'm huge in Seattle's farm system at the moment.
I agree.
And I wouldn't be turning that many eyes over there because that's a good system to look at too. But there are, organizations like I mentioned that you should be looking at and trying to see if you can grab anyone that might be on the bubble with those organizations, trying to grab them away. One of those, while we're talking front office, I actually like the Barfield move. I think maybe that might be the only move that I'm like, okay, I like that one, but you need more of that, and you need to really start building this the right way. And we haven't seen that at all, not since I was born. Even how they won it the World Series, and probably one of the most odd seasons you'll see. And that wasn't even built to last. Unfortunately, it's hard to say that, but it's true.
Yeah. You're completely right. It's completely right. It's frustrating. It's difficult. I don't think there's any way to wrap your head around it other than just, it is the reality, right? It's where we are right now. But like we've talked about, me and you both agree on this point, right? Like the pitching is in a decent spot. You look up and down the organization at the major league level, at the lower levels, right? Like there's a lot of pitching depth in this farm system right now. You got to get some bats, man. That's what it comes down to. This offseason, you got to get some bats. You got to get some upper minor league level bats that can be legit contributors as soon as 25, 26, right? And going beyond that, right? Like you have to get some bats. It's that simple. There's a lot other, like we talked about this whole episode, like there's other things that have to be done as well, but you got to get some bats, man. You absolutely have to find some consistent high level upside hitters to add to this farm system and to add to the major league team. You got to sign some free agents. You got to trade for some guys in a Crochet trade and a Robert trade, right? Like you have to make the entire focal point of roster additions hitters. Just continue to add hitters to this mesh and hope that some of them stick and some of them grow into talented players. Because like you said, like, I mean, if Luis Roberts traded this offseason, there is not anybody on this big league roster currently that has proven themselves to be a key piece of the future. There's guys that I think can be, right? But there is nobody else currently on the major league roster that is a proven piece of the big league roster. That's just the truth. Like that is the cold, hard truth right now. And I think there's guys coming up that will be, right? Like I do still believe Colson Montgomery is an everyday big league player. I do believe that Brian Ramos will be a big league contributor for this team moving forward. I do believe Edgar Caro is going to be the future of this, catching position for a long time, right? Like those are all good things. You got to add some bats. You have to add at least 2 to 3 major league everyday players in terms of the offense and a handful more in the minor leagues that can eventually become key contributors as well.
Right. And it sucks because the position that they're in, I mean, normally I would like to look at free agency and look at those names that are premium talent to spend money on.
Not getting those.
But we're not in that picture to even think about that. You're really I really don't know how, if they're going to be aggressive from the beginning. I really, with how things are kind of going, man, I think the priority is going to be on those Crochet Robert talks that because you at this setup and this current moment, you would want to target your 1-year bats, guys that you can get for a 1-year deal and flip at the deadline for value. That is what you're eyeballing, but you're in a tough position because it's tough. I mean, I think regardless, at the end of the day, you can still target those guys and get them, and then not worry about what you're getting in return in those deals, because the bats, because again, when you're trading Crochet, Robert, you're really looking for the value of these prospects on the hitting side of it, which is what should have been. This should have been done at the deadline, right? This past deadline, should have been done. But regardless, you're using that same approach this offseason. And again, you're going to be signing these 1-year guys, and then you're going to be making these deals and then playing with the 40-man roster construction that we were just talking about going into spring training. Right. But again, that's really what I feel like that's going to be basically what this offseason should come down to. I don't think really anything's going to surprise us, nor should it, because for me, it's all about doing this rebuild right. You got to scrap what value is left to completely finish it before you can worry about starting to build off the rebuild. Because you got to max out value, and you got to see what's going to stick. And again, depending on how those deals go, man, you're talking about the whole layering aspect of that, and which of these guys are going to be in AA, single A, and whatnot, and layering each level so that in the next 2 years, these guys come up, you see where they stick, and then you're in a position to see what holes you really do have.
You're completely right. And you can get some guys, right? Like they're not out of, like you said, like the team is not going to be in contention for your big name free agents, your top end guys, but there's some middle tier guys that would take substantive money from the White Sox to play on a 2-year deal or even a 1-year deal, whatever it is, right? To prove their value, to potentially get flipped, or to become a key piece moving forward if they really prove themselves and earn an extension of some sort, or they want to even sign 1 or 2 guys to a long-term deal. Like you're not going to get the big guys, but free agency has a ton of players, right? Like That's a great example. Tyler O'Neill right there. That's a great
guy.
example of a guy you can sign. You can afford to give him. I mean, White Sox have no money on the contract if you are on the books, right? Like if you're trading Luis Robert, your only contract aside from arbitration that is actually locked up is Andrew Benintendi. And they might try to trade him too. Frankly, the way he's been hitting the past 2 months, you could maybe get off Benintendi's contract, frankly. So if you move one or both those guys, they're even with those guys still. Let's say Luis Robert doesn't get traded. You still have 40 to 60 million in room to sign guys of just so much money. And I know they're going to reduce the payroll from where it was a few years ago, but this is a team that was upwards of $200 million in 2021, right? Like there's so much room to sign some guys and to spend some money. Tyler O'Neill is a great example. You can afford to give him a 3-4 year deal. If it works, awesome. If it doesn't, cool. You trade him for what you can get, you say what you can, or you sign him to a 1 year deal worth a ton of money, and then you flip him at the deadline, or a 1 year deal with an option. So you have the team ability to keep him for another year if you want to, or you can flip him for a year and a half of control, right? There's so many options and ways to play with it. I mean, Christian Walker is a guy that comes to mind for me when I think of like instant offensive impact. You can have a thumper in the middle of your lineup who's been proven. He's an older guy, sure. Sign him to a 2 year deal. If he's amazing, you flip him with a year and a half left of his contract, and that's a great return in trade. If he's solid and you don't think the trade value's out there, you have him for another season, and that's another veteran guy you can keep around for a second year, right? There's guys like that. I mean, even Gleyber Torres, buy low on Gleyber Torres, sure, go ahead. He's having a poor season. He hasn't been great. That's still a guy that was, I mean, last year would have been one of the best hitters in the White Sox, right? Like, let's see it. Why not? Brandon Lau, that's a guy who, you know, has been a master in his career. He's dealt with some injuries, right? But like you can sign him to a 2 year deal and it's literally no risk. You either flip him or he stays on your team and you have the money because you're not spending on anybody significant right now because you're in the middle of a massive rebuild, right? So it's like there's so many options of things you can do and ways you can kind of play with this roster to try and make things work. They just got to be willing to spend some money and they got to be willing to make these trades, right? So it's a balance of the two things, but you make some big trades, you get some huge prospects back and you sign some guys and you really just go out there and get aggressive with the market a little bit. There's a way you can make this offense at least passable next year while also getting more guys back that you can potentially flip at the deadline.
All right. And I mean, honestly, Tyler O'Neill, that was a guy that I've had my eye on when I started looking at the potential free agents. I can't get too excited because I got to wait and see, you know, once the offseason hits, once we start seeing actually who was kept, who was actually allowed to test free agency. Then I get a better idea of what kind of potential could be there. And furthermore, on our off-season outlook, that'll probably come in November for our live show. That's what that's on our side of it for the Blackout Show. So stay tuned on that. We got a couple episodes here as we wrap up the season here. We got 2-3 weeks left. And we'll probably have a couple more special guests even in October. We're always, bro, you know, Slavko and Junior and us, we're always talking about trying to close, you know, some of our plans up for guests. All comes down to schedules and timing. But I'm excited. We got some things here coming up that I just gotta wait because, to be honest, man, Slavko, he told us that he was doing 10 straight days of 12-hour shifts with the Big Ten network with his production side of it, and it turned from 10 to 18. So
that's some long days.
That's what you expect from the Big Ten network. You know, a lot of good college football here that just happened for the first 2 weeks, and it's not stopping for him. So we're going to have to try to get Slavko on one of those days, some free time, so we can schedule some other special guests. But enough of my talk of what's to come. Elijah, time for some shout-outs real quick. I'll let you start off. Give us any shout-outs and also any upcoming work of yours.
Yeah. Shout out to my cousin. Me and him are heading out for a Europe trip this week. I'm really excited. It's my first time going to Europe, so that's a cool thing on a little personal note there for me. And then in terms of some work stuff, you guys did a great job. I appreciate you promoting it a little bit today. But we just over at Just Baseball, we just launched a revamped newsletter. That is, we put a ton of work into making it, you know, really like a super comprehensive, like every single baseball highlight, prospect content, some video clips, some tweets. It's really going to be a pretty cool newsletter, in my opinion. I think I'm obviously biased here because I'm working on creating it, but you know, we're going to be bringing out weekly newsletters in addition to prospect specific newsletters, either bi-weekly or monthly potentially. It's going to be a pretty awesome way to really just get like all-encompassing baseball news for people that just want kind of a simple way in their email to just learn about everything going on around Major League Baseball and minor league baseball as well. So definitely check that out. I've been posting all over it. It's in my X feed in addition to the Just Baseball page, but super cool little way, project I've been working on for a while now to just stay up to date with everything baseball related, and it's free. So there's no damage, right? It's if you sign up, you subscribe, you're going to get it every week in your email, and it's just a free way to learn about baseball, and hopefully we'll have some really cool features on there. So that's a little personal note. And then otherwise, we're doing Just Baseball's top White Sox prospect is dropping this week. Me and Arm Layton are going to be doing a whole breakdown of his. Me and him kind of collaborated on the top prospects, which was awesome for me because he usually does all those lists for us. So really cool to do that with him. And then we're going to be having a whole podcast episode talking about all our top White Sox prospects on that side as well. So a lot of baseball content before you know it, it's going to be playoffs, and I'm fired up. It's always good to hop on with you, Gonzo, and just to talk baseball. And as much as the season's been brutal, I still never turn down the opportunity to write and talk about the White Sox and the prospect side especially.
Yeah, and I think me and you both have the passion for baseball, especially White Sox. And at the end of the day, both of us are going to be here. You on your side with what you're doing, me over here, 100%. And then a little merging of both from time to time. Just because I like to say iron sharpens iron, And we've been pretty. I'm not even gonna lie here, man. With our network, we've gone. I think this past month we had 2 out of the 4 weeks. We only had 2 shows, just with the conflicting of schedules. And I can't remember on my shout outs recently. I didn't even get to mention. I don't think like I said, with the scheduling conflict that I got to shout out my girlfriend. But we celebrate not only her birthday but our 5-year anniversary together. So a lot has hit us in the past month, and I'm just happy we were able to celebrate. And I can't leave. I had to start with her because I couldn't leave anything else out of it. But I also want to give a shout out to everyone in the chat that's listening. Thank you for commenting. I saw Locked On White Sox here. I saw Wolf and Rolando. Thank you everyone that tuned in and commented, and for those that are going to be listening to the podcast once it comes out later tonight into tomorrow. Thank you for listening. Before I wrap it up, I wanted to do one moment of silence here for remembering this date and never forgetting what happened 23 years ago. So if you can, we'll have 1 minute of silence. All right, thank you for giving me that moment. Again, we hit everything on the White Sox, from the debuts of Jairo Iriarte, Sean Burke. We talked about the firing of Marco Brady, and we talked about some of that roster construction, Elijah. Again, thank you for joining me, man. It was nice having you on.
Always good.
Looking forward to wrapping the season up and hitting the off season. And again, we'll have to have you on this off season, just to reflect on how things went. And again, everyone, thank you for tuning in and watching the Blackout.